Okay, in this lesson, I'm going to be talking about rounding numbers, and in science, we generally will round our values when we're calculating averages. So, students have to understand how to round and have to understand place values. So, in this lesson, I'm going to review a little bit about place values, and then I'm going to talk about rounding. And there's three sections of this um, sheet right here. One is right here, and that just simply shows the place values up down to the 10,000s and up to the millions. Those are pretty big numbers and on the left, and small numbers down on the right. And then section two is our rules for rounding. And I found a little saying on the internet, and I'm going to review that a little bit. And then finally, down below here, number three, this section here is some practice numbers, and I'm going to go over one, and then I'm going to give you a chance, give you about 5 minutes or so to do some rounding practice yourself. So here we go. First of all, you have to understand how to find place value, because we're going to be asking you to round to a certain place value, and each number has a value. And we have a base 10 system, our counting system. And what that means is that in each of the columns, if we can think of numbers as columns or even buckets. And in each column or bucket, we can only put 9. If we put the 10th one, it rolls over into the next value. So for example, let's look at the ones, right? We can count in the ones right here. We could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we're still in the ones place. But think about it, if we add one more, this turns to a 0, and we add 1 to the second bucket, we could say, which is called the tens. And then, of course, in the tens, there's also only room for 9. And I know we call it a base 10 system, but that's basically what it means. As we move from left to right, we're multiplying our values by 10. So a 4 in the tens place means it's 40. A 4 in the hundreds place means it's 400. And the 4 here in the thousands place means it's 4,000. So as we move to the left, you can see that they multiply in value by 10 every time we move one space to the left. Now the opposite is true in the decimal points. So let's think about that. If we're in the ones space right here, we start taking parts of 1 away, then we get into the decimal value, which is less than 1. And again, each of these buckets can only hold 9. And as we go to the right, we are also decreasing in value. But we do the opposite operation. Instead of multiplying times 10 as we go to the left, we're going to divide by 10. Let's just think about that for a second. So we have this 1/10 right here, right? If we divide the 1/10 by 10, we get 1/100th, right? So and then, of course, we go to the fourth one, we get 1/1000th. And I don't have any room to show you the next one because the numbers start getting really, really, really big. But in science, we are going to round to the hundredths, which is this place most of the time. Most of the time, we're only going to round to the hundredths place because in science and with our measuring devices, our margin of error on the measuring devices is greater than 1/100th in every case. We almost have no measuring device that will measure to the 1,000th. Some stopwatches may on a clock or something, for example, but for our class and our purposes, 1/100th is about the smallest number that we're going to get to. Now there are many applications for that, and you have to know what the place values are. But for the most part, in science, we're only going to round to the hundreds. Okay, so that's the first step, knowing the place values. And of course over here, we have the ones and the tens and the hundreds and the thousands and the 10,000s and the 100,000s and the millions. What I really recommend you doing is when you do this, always start from the decimal point, and then go through the motions. Don't go to number 2 and say, well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, and I think that's the 10,000s. Don't do that. Start here and say, this is the ones, and then keep multiplying it by 10, until you get to the place value where you're at. So for example, we're going to go to the 6, right? We'd go the ones, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, and then we would identify it as the 100,000s place. The same is true going to the right. If we start at the decimal point here and we're going to the right, we're just going to divide by 10. So we start here, we go 1/10, 1 100th, 1 1,000th, and 1 10,000th, and so on. So it's basically the same. And you can see that on the right-hand side, we're adding a 0 to the value, but it's in the decimal, it's in the denominator's place. Over here, we're actually doing it in the numerator's place. And you think about it for a second, 1 is actually 1 over 1, right? So we're changing the numerator times 10 as we're going this direction. In this case, we're changing the denominator by 10. So when we change the divisor, the number gets smaller. As we change the numerator up here, the number gets bigger. Okay, so here's something to remember when we're actually working with numbers. This is a really good saying I found on the internet, and it's easy to remember. 5 or more, let it soar. Soar means to fly. And so we associate flying with going up. So 5 or more, you let it soar. So that means that the number is going to go up 1 in value. And then the second line is 4 or less, let it rest. And this is a really good saying because I've heard math teachers say, 5 or more, round it, and 4 or more, round down. Well, you don't round down, really. You keep the number the same. So I really like this saying, 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, just let it rest. And we'll give you an example down here below. Okay, let's start with the first one. I'll start with the first one and then go work across, and then you can do the last 3. All right, so as we're down here, we're going to identify the number. Here's our first practice number down here, and we're going to round to the ones. So this is really, really easy. We're going to round to the ones place. Okay, so that doesn't mean that we're going to just only have the ones value there. We're just saying we're going to round it to the ones. And when we're rounding to the ones, we have to consider the number to the right of it. If the number to the right is 5 or more, we're going to let it soar. We're going to raise it up. If it's less than 4 or less, if it's less than 5, we're going to let it rest. We're going to keep it the same. In this particular case, the 2 is next to it. 2 is less than 5, so we're going to let it rest. So in this particular case, if we're rounding to the ones, we're going to have 357, and that's it. We're going to chop this whole number off right here, because 296 thousandths is way less than half of another full number. So we're just going to keep it at 357. Okay, if we're rounding to the hundreds, we have to identify the hundreds place. And I said my strategy is to start with the decimal point and move to the left, multiplying it times 10. So the first is the ones, and multiply it times 10 is the tens, and then we multiply the tens by 10, and we end up with the hundreds. So in this particular case, the 3 is in the hundreds place. Now, we have to consider the number next to it. And again, up here we are, 5 or more, let it soar. So we're going to raise it up, or 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. In this particular case, in the hundreds place, we have a 3, and 57 is next to it. 57 is more than 50. So we're going to raise the 300 up to 400. and then we're going to chop off all the others, right? So basically that's what we're going to do. All right, so now, and that would be your final answer. And now we're going to start, here, this is a decimal value, the 1/100th place. So we're going to get over here, let me get our, let me see if I can, I'm having a little difficulty with my little timer up here. Okay, so let's take the eraser, and I'm going to erase this because I'm kind of getting a little, oops. Yeah, I have to bring that back a little bit. All right, so I think we can still see it. So the 1/100th place. This is 296. So let's look at the hundreds. First of all, we start right here. The 2 is in the tenths place space. So we divide the tenths by a 10, and we end up with a hundredths. So our hundredths place is right there. The 9 is in the hundredths place. So when we're rounding the 9, we have to consider the next number to it. That's a 6. So it is 5 or more. So we're going to let it soar, as they would say. So for the tenths place, we're going to round it. Let's see. We're going to round it up. So if it's a 9, now this is interesting. Remember I talked to you about the buckets being the only able to carry 9. Well, we're going to fill up this bucket if we add one more. So it's actually going to turn this into a 0, and we're going to have to add 1 to the 2 on this side. So let's look at this, the hundreds. It's going to be 357.3. And then you could put the 0 on there, but there's no value there. So we're just going to say that that's our final answer. That was kind of a tricky one. So let's look at the tens. Tens are a whole number. So our ones are here. We're going to start at the decimal point. This is the ones. This is the tens. So we're going to round this to the tens. So we have to look at the number to the right. In this case, the number is a 7. So if the number is a 7, if we look up here, we say if it's 5 or more, we're going to let it soar. So we're going to round that one up and kill the numbers to the right of it. So for the tens, we're going to say it's 360. 360, because 357 is closer to 360 than it is to 350, and we're rounding to the tens place. And then finally, let's go to the tenths space. That's a decimal. We come up here, and we look up here. Here's the tenths place. So that's the first one on the decimal. So I look to here. And in this case, the 2 is in the tenths space. So again, we look to the right, and we see if it's 5 or more, we're going to let it soar. And 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. So in this particular case, in the tenths space, we have a 2. But in the hundredths place, we have a 9. So again, this is much more than half. So we're going to round up the tenths. So, excuse me. So let's look over here. And our next one is the tenths. So let's look at the tenths over here. Let's find this. We say, let's see, the tenths we already decided was a 2 with a 9 next to it. So we're going to actually raise that number up. So we go 357.3. And we're going to end up chopping that 996 off, because 96 is higher than 50, correct? All right. So there are 3 more numbers here. I want you to work on them yourselves. You'll fill in your little grid on your own paper, and then we'll come back and we'll check your answers. Three, 2, 1, 0. Now your attention's back on me. So here we go for the last 4 numbers. Down here we have some numbers here for you. So let's start with the first one. It's 549,643. And it's the first thing we do is round to the ones. The ones are right here. Excuse me. My pen's not acting normal. So our ones place is right there. So we look to the right. If it's 5 or more, we let it soar. Well, in this case it is. So we're going to round that number up. 550 in the ones place. Again, here's 9 in our bucket, so if we're going to round up, it's going to make it a 10, and you can't put the 10 there, so you're going to have to add 1 to the tens bucket and make that a 5, and then carry the number, so we have 550. In the hundreds place, the hundreds is a 5, and the number to the right is a 4, so we are going to let that one rest, right? 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. So in the hundreds place, we're going to round this one down to 500, because we're closer to 500 than we are 600. Okay, the 1/100th place, well, the 1/100th place is the 4, and so we have to look at the number to the right. It's a 3, so again, it's 4 or less, so we're going to let it rest. So our answer is going to be 549.64. All right, everybody get that one correct? I hope so. Okay, now we go to the tens. The tens is the whole number place again, so we're going to go to the left of the decimal. And the tens spot is a 4. We look to the right. 9 is greater than 5. Or more than 5, so we're going to let that one soar. So 5 or more and let it soar. So in the 10 spot, we're going to go 550, because we're closer to 550 than we are 540. All right, so now we're going to go to the tenths. The tenth spot is a 4, and we look to the number to the right, and the number to the right is a 3, so it is 4 or less, so we're going to let this one rest. So the 10 spot, we're going to have 549.6. Everybody get that right? Good. Okay, so now let's go to the next one. 927.487 in the ones. Well, the ones, there's a 7. The number next to it's a 4. So you guessed it, 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. So 927 is going to be our final answer. For the hundreds place, the hundreds is there's a 9, there's a 2 next to it. So again, in the hundreds place, we're going to let it rest. So in this particular case, we're going to round down to 900, because we're closer to 900 than we are 1,000. Okay, the 1/100th place, in this case, our 1/100th place is an 8. The number next to it is a 7, so it's 5 or more, so we're going to let it soar. So 927.49, and we'll just chop off the 7, because that's in the thousands place. Okay, for the tens, tens are a whole number, so our tens place is the 2. Look to the right, it's a 7. So the 7 is 5 or more, so we're going to let it soar. So in the tens place, 930 is going to be our answer. Okay, and next are the 1/10th spot. The 1/10th spot is that 4, and to the right of the 4 is an 8. So again, we've had a lot of soaring going on with this one. So 927.5, because 87 is greater than 50. All right, so let's go down to the last one. Oh, well, we have 2 more. Let's go to the next one. So the ones place. The ones place is a 3. The next number next to it to the right is a 9. So we're going to, yep, you got it, let it soar. 184. Next one, the hundredths. Well, 83 is closer to the next hundred, so we're just going to say 200. Okay, and the 1/100ths. Okay, here's an 8. The 2 is less than 5, so we're going to let it lie. So we have 183.98. And in this particular case, this is a good example of how we round in science. We're going to round to the hundredths place. Okay, the tenths place. So in the tenths place, we have a 9, and next to it is an 8. So that's higher or greater than 5 or more than 5, so we're going to let it soar in the tenth spot. So we have 100, and, well, actually, I made a mistake. In this particular case, in the tens spot, we have an 8. The number next to it is 3, which is less than 5, so we're going to let it rest. So we're going to go to 180, 180, and kill it right there, because we're in the 10th spot. So because we're closer to 180 here than we are to 190. All right, and then in the 10th spot, you can just write this number out, 183 point. Now we have to consider what's in the tenths. It's a 9. So if we look to the right, that's an 8. So we're going to let it soar. And again, here I made a mistake because I have to erase my 183 here because we're going to raise it up 1. So sometimes you gotta, I was trying to be fast, but sometimes when you get to try to be fast, you end up taking more time because you make a mistake. Okay, so again, we're rounding to the 10th spot, and here's this 8. This is creating a problem for us because now I'm going to add 1 to 9, which is going to fill that bucket up and spill into the next one. So we're going to have to raise this to 184. So I'm going to go raise this to 184, and it's 0.0 now, right? Because we went from 9 to there. So we really don't even need that 0, but I just put it there to show you that that's what happened to it. So I'm going to erase that, and our final answer would be something like that, 184. Okay, and then our last example is right here, 637.421. So in the 1 spot we have a 7, the next number 2 is a 4, so we're going to let it lie, right? We're going to let it rest right there, 637. We're going to drop the rest of it because again, 0.421 is less than half. So we're going to keep it the same. Okay, in the hundredths place, 637. So if we're rounding to the hundredths, we look at the next number. It's a 3, it's 4, or less. So we're going to let it rest. So this is closer to 600 than it is 700. Next number, the 100ths place. In the hundredths place is a 2. We look at the number next to it, it's a 1. So we're going to, yes, you got it. We're going to let it rest. 637.42. Okay, now we're going to the tens. The tens, this is going to be easy again. So we have 637.421, and the tens place is right here. The number next to it is a 7. It's 5 or more, so we're going to let it soar. So that 7 is going to change this 3 into a 4. So our number is going to be 640. And again, let's think about this. 637 is closer to 640 than it is to 630, and that's how we do it. And then finally, the last one, we're rounding to the tenths place. The tenths place is a 2. We look to the number, oh no, excuse me, the tenths place is a 4. Again, there we go again. If you don't start at the decimal point and go to the right, you're going to mess it up. Okay, so again, I start at the decimal point. The 4 is in the tens place. I look to the right of that. To the right of the 4 is a 2. It is 4 or less, so I'm going to let it rest. So our answer here is going to be 637.4. Okay, so I hope this is helpful for you, and happy science.